All right, everyone. Welcome to another great edition of our Santa Fe Hispanic Chamber of Commerce podcast. As always, I'm Marcos Maes, one of the proud board members of the Santa Fe Hispanic Chamber of Commerce podcast. And with us, of course, as always, our president, David Fresquez, and of course, our business director, Janelle Torres. Janelle, can you pronounce your last name for me so I don't mess it up? I don't want to sound like a buffoon right here on our podcast.
That's okay. It's pretty unique. It's Janelle Torres Montemarano.
Thank you, Janelle. I did not want to botch that because people get my name wrong all the time. It's not Marcos Maes, it's Marco Maez or Marco Mays. It just drives me crazy. It's nails on a chalkboard for me. So I did not want to make that same mistake with you. So thank you so much, Janelle. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And before we get started with our awesome guest today, Erik Moulton, co-founder of the Pit Press, we're going to just thank some of our sponsors for our upcoming 40 Under 40 event. It is our Super Bowl event. It's our second annual 40 Under 40, where we have the opportunity to honor some of our top business leaders, young business leaders, not only in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but in northern New Mexico as well. We'd like to thank our sponsors, our platinum sponsors, and those are, of course, the Santa Fe New Mexican, the City of Santa Fe, PNM, and of course, the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Without them, this isn't possible. So we're just so thankful to them and their great support. Also, if you look down at the ticker, if you are watching this, you can see all of our 40 Under 40 class of 2023. So we are just thrilled that we're going to be able to honor them here coming up very, very shortly. Janelle, correct me if I'm wrong. When is our 40 Under 40 event? Is that September 20th? September 22nd?
It's the 22nd, yes, of September. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So so coming up here very shortly, there's still some tickets available. So talk to Janelle, talk to the board, contact our chamber website, and we can still get you some tickets for this wonderful event. So without further ado, we are happy to be able to speak with today the co-founder of the Pit Press. This is Erik Moulton. Erik, how are you today, my friend?
Good morning, guys. No, I'm doing great. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm really good friends with David. We've been friends for pretty much our whole lives. So I'm glad he finally started a podcast, brought you guys along for the ride. I'm looking forward to seeing this thing grow.
Erik, we're really, really thrilled to have you, my friend, and thank you so much for being here. So first off, you are a native of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and you have deep, deep roots here in Santa Fe. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, born and raised in Santa Fe. My immediate family, both my parents, my brother and his family, still live in Santa Fe. Graduate of Capitol High in 2005. And then I kind of stuck around the northern New Mexico territory for school. I went to Luna Community College, played baseball there for 2 years. I left for a brief period for chasing the baseball dream, and then end up coming back and graduating from New Mexico Highlands back in 2009, 2010.
So that's excellent, man.
I'm there all the time, man.
So I think we have a similar trajectory, a similar pathway regarding education. So I also am a graduate of Capitol High School, so a proud CHS graduate. I went to UNM, I completed there, and then I went on to New Mexico Highlands University and got my master's degree at Highlands. So definitely a Lobo and a Cowboy. So glad to hear that you had a similar path and decided to keep your roots right here in northern New Mexico. So Janelle, David. So David, you have had the pleasure of knowing Erik for quite some time. Tell us a little bit about maybe how you guys met, your connections to the city, to what you guys do, what you have in common.
Oh gosh, don't tell him every story.
We want to hear everything.
Yeah, so I think the root of it is just the love for sports, right, Erik?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I think we met like in third grade with the AAU basketball team, played against each other in elementary school, then played together middle school, and then some in high school. So yeah, it was just a love of sports. Naturally, I'm a Bronco fan. Erik's a Cowboys fan. So it's just, we just communicate all the time. But I think it was just the love of sports. So, yeah. Absolutely. And that kind of gives an intro into the Pit Press on what Erik's currently doing now.
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Now, before we get into that, Erik, David, I'm surprised y'all were able to stay friends with Cowboys and Broncos. That's like oil and water right there.
Yeah, he doesn't have much to brag on. I think they had, 3 wins last year?
Yeah, it's some dark times for the Broncos.
Yeah,
It really, really is. So, Erik, tell us a little bit about the Pit Press, what the details of the business, how you founded that, why. Tell us a little bit about that and some of the successes.
Okay, yeah, let me take a step back and kind of introduce or my background and how that kind of led to be what the Pit Press is and where it came from. So after I graduated from New Mexico Highlands, I was kind of stuck, right? I graduated with a bachelor's degree in accounting, business management, and I wasn't so sure that's something I wanted to do right out of school. I played baseball in college, and that's kind of what led me traveling all over the place. So I knew that was where my passion lied. And so when I was graduating, I didn't know what the next step would be. And I actually discovered a unique master's degree program at the University of New Mexico, which was in sport administration. So I did a little bit of exploring and thought that, hey, you know what? I need to get my master's anyways. So let's explore that. I took a tour. I met with a few of the professors, and this was like right up my alley. So it was my dad at the time was the athletic director at Capitol, and he was kind of in that same running a business, right? Kind of the CEO of the athletic department at a high school, and that's what intrigued me. So I enrolled at UNM, and I ended up getting my master's in sport administration, which opened kind of a lot of doors for me. After I graduated with my master's, I ended up getting a job full time with the Albuquerque Isotopes, working in their sales and marketing department. I wanted to marry the two degrees together, right? I had business and management accounting, but I also had a love for sports. So I said, what a cool opportunity to be able to do both. The job was pretty unique. I worked with the promotions, marketing, and ticket sales front. So we were doing a lot of outbound calls, marketing for the Isotopes, doing a lot of like sponsoring events, community relations, on-field promotions, which was cool. I mean, you see the group of people on the field shooting the t-shirt guns and kind of managing the chili race and stuff. There were times where we didn't have enough guests or enough volunteers to do the chili race, so we had to suit up and run the race just to make sure that it got done that day. After the season wrapped up, I had to do kind of some more exploring on my own. I didn't know if that industry was for me because it demanded almost 80 hours a week. I didn't have a summer.
Wow.
A lot of my family and friends were at the games having a good time where I was working, and I didn't really get to go on vacation. So I was like, you know what? I don't know if this life was for me. And then another opportunity called, sales and marketing with HP, Hewlett Packard in Rio Rancho. So I ended up taking it. It was more money. It was more stability. So I kind of had to put the sports business background or dream kind of on hold. Fast forward 10 years, I'm now the regional sales manager for HME specialists. So medical equipment, I cover the entire state of New Mexico. I manage a team of about 15 sales reps. So that's kind of where the whole sales and marketing and account management kind of led me. But then there was still something missing, the sports piece, right? I was an avid sports watcher, Cowboy fan, Cubs fan, and big time Lobo fan. You can, during the winter times, catch me at every home game at the Pit, right? Like I have my same seats. I follow them religiously. Anything that I can uncover online, any article, any podcast or radio show, you could definitely know that I had my kind of my pulse on it. But then I kind of just in doing that and following the team, the university and the athletic department do a pretty good job of kind of exposing them and marketing them. But there's just wasn't enough. Like local radio, TV networks, KOAT, KRQE, they all have their own sports reporters, but it kind of just touches on the surface of everything. There's always like one story, or there's the radio show like on 770 AM, and it's a brief 5 to 10 minutes coverage of the team. And for me, I'm out there seeking as much information that I can get on there. I know I can't be the only one that's out there like involved, this loyalty with the program. Um, and I just wanted more of it. And so I was like, you know what? If no one's going to act on this, then why don't I start something, right? I didn't have a background in journalism. I didn't have a background in kind of TV, but I did have a background in sports marketing and management. And I was like, you know what? If I can help not only promote this team, but if I can build either a business or some kind of media stream, I think I'm onto something because no one in this market is doing it.
Wow.
So while working at HP prior to HME, I made a lot of friends there. And one of those close friends is Ryan Tamari. Ryan has a background in sports journalism, the media, the radio. He's worked in New York with CBS Sports. He's worked for the Albuquerque Journal. He worked for the Daily Lobo, which covered UNM Athletics as a student at UNM. He worked for the Isotopes as well. And I knew he had his own podcast. He was kind of just covering more of like a national sports, kind of in a funny way, kind of a comedic way. He's a funny guy. He doesn't take himself too seriously, which kind of gives him an edge. But I approached him with this idea in December of 2022 and just kind of gauged his interest to, hey man, like this is kind of what I'm thinking. What do you feel about it? And he was 100% dedicated in fully from that first conversation we had. I think that conversation lasted about an hour and a half, just kind of rambling ideas off each other. And we're like, you know what? Let's just do it. He ended up setting up something similar to this. It was a Zoom call where he had all the equipment already to go ahead and record it. And we started discussing it a little bit more. And he's like, you know what? I have a friend of mine who covers athletics from a broadcasting standpoint. He's the voice of Western New Mexico athletics. He kind of covers them from game day experience, like play-by-play analysis for basketball, women's basketball, football, softball, and he also does UNM Athletics from time to time. His name is Ed Nunez. So I was like, I'm going to bring him in because I think us combining all of our three skills and talents would be really good for listening. And he's a big-time Lobo fan. He's a Cowboy fan. You guys will hit it off. And so he set up a Zoom call, and we all jumped in, and Ryan had a few questions or topics lined up, and we just started rambling off a bunch of stuff we knew about Lobo sports and basketball. We were kind of in the midst of Lobo basketball season. At the time, they were like 10-0 and undefeated. We're like, it was a perfect time to do this. And the Pit Press was born. We came up with the name together because we wanted to cover them from like a newspaper broadcasting perspective, but we wanted it to be aimed towards the fan and give it like that fan perspective. And so I think that first episode we released, we got synced up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're on social media. We just launched our YouTube channel, and that really took off pretty quick. Our first episode, though, was maybe like 15 listeners, and we were so stoked with like 15. And now I want to say each episode is generating about 250 downloads per episode. Our YouTube channel launched about 4 weeks ago, and we already have 1,500 views. So I think the affinity and the relationship and the rapport that UNM Athletics has with this community, I think we really hit the nail on the head. And people are asking for more content. It's just all three of us have full-time jobs. Well, I think Ed is retired, but Ryan and I have full-time jobs, so we try our best to push as much information as we can out that my life, my wife, and my kiddo will allow. So I think we want to take this to the next level. We recently just gained 100% full press access to UNM Athletics. We had to go through their media relations department, and that's kind of where we're at now. We've been covering the UNM football program and kind of gearing up for the basketball program. So that's how it was born, and that's kind of where we stand now. So, 9 months in, and we've, I think, surpassed 4,000 overall impressions on social media, YouTube, and kind of hope to keep building on that.
Erik, that is tremendously exciting, and congratulations. So it's one thing, right, to have that idea of starting the Pit Press podcast. It's the other thing to be able to get those loyal listeners and those downloads. So how did you go about doing that? So you said you started off with those 15 listeners, which must have been a great feeling, and it's only grown from there. How have you gotten the word out about the Pit Press? How can people find out about you all?
Oh gosh, I think it's a combination of a few things. Social media, having a Twitter account, having Instagram, Facebook, being able to push through there. But then also, I think the biggest piece of that is having the credibility, because no one's going to follow you, no one's going to tune in unless you have a credible guest. You have something engaging or enticing that people have to see to be intrigued in order to go visit your page and listen. So I think what we started at, which actually kind of propelled us, was we had a few people on the podcast early. Kurt Roth being one of them. Kurt Roth is the founder, creator of the 505 Sports Venture, the NIL deal with UNM Athletics. That's probably for a whole other conversation. But we had him on our podcast. He was great. He's a big time Lobo fan, Lobo Club supporter. And he's just been good to talk to. So I think having a guest like that and having his followers kind of get some exposure with our podcast, because he kind of pushed it out there for us. And then we also broke some news stories. We had Ryan was kind of following the trail, and we released or posted on Twitter that Nelly Jr. Joseph was going to commit to UNM well before anything had come out. And that tweet ended up having like 250,000 impressions on Twitter.
Nice.
Likes or retweets, and we're like, holy crap. And that kind of gave us a little exposure. Some people were kind of skeptical at first, but then Nelly Jr. Joseph ended up committing to UNM maybe like 2 or 3 weeks later. So we were like first to the table with that news, which gave us some credibility. And now we just have to keep continuing to bring on the guests, right? We have access to the student athletes and the coaches now. We've had a few basketball players on. We've had Danny Gonzalez and a few football players on. Most recently, we had Tavion Combs. He's the starting safety for UNM. Come on. Prior to that, we had Luke Wysong and Zach V. Hill. They're both from Rio Rancho. One kid graduated from Cleveland, the other one from Rio Rancho. So that kind of gave us that local feel, right? We were featuring these 2 local star athletes at their high school at the time on the Pit Press. So they shared through all their social media channels. And now I think we're up to 650, maybe 700 Twitter followers, about 250 Instagram, and about, like I said, 4,000 total downloads on our podcast now. So it's all about consistency, but also getting the right guests on, because when you have the guests come on your podcast, they end up distributing it through their social media platforms too, because they were interviewed or featured.
That is tremendously exciting,
kind of our
Erik.
formula.
That is awesome, my friend. So speaking of guests, do you have any particular dream guests that you would love to get on there? Maybe like a former Lobo. I know for me, I live and died with the Lobos, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, the basketball program, Clayton Shields and Charles Smith and Kenny Thomas. So I'm just thinking, like, who would be some of your dream guests? Maybe current Lobo, past Lobo players, coaches, anybody that you have on your wish list?
Oh gosh, yeah, that list is endless. Probably, just the amount of guests, like Brian Urlacher, right? That would be a really big one. Of course, Kenny Thomas, Clayton Shields, Charles Spider Smith, Royce Only, Dave Bliss, Fran Fraschilla, and the list goes on, right? We want to get Patino on the show too. We had a few ex-Lobos on already. Alex Kirk, who's a native New Mexican, right? He graduated from Los Alamos. We had him on. We're also going to get Darius Gary at some point on. You remember Darius Gary. He actually just moved back to Albuquerque. He's working as a trainer, basketball trainer, with that new ABC basketball academy that Brandon Mason had put together. We had those guys on. the Enchantment basketball for the basketball tournament that was just on ESPN over the summer. We had a few of those guys on. Roman Martinez.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we've had a few of those guys on. We just got to continue knocking down doors and bringing new guests on, right? So like Hugh Greenwood would be another big one. Names that are real familiar in this neck of the woods. And we want to tell a personal story. We want the podcasts to kind of reflect on their personal lives. What have you been up to lately? But while also touching on their playing days, right? Because I think that's what people are most interested in. Last year we had Steve Alford come on the show prior to the game that Nevada visited the pit, and we asked him some questions on what it would be like to finish, or what it would be like to revisit the pit, but this time on the opposing bench. And coming with like that exclusive content. And I think a lot of the local radio stations have all this press access, but we have more of like a national regional outreach. And that's kind of where we want to focus on.
David.
Yeah, Eric, speak to us about some of the business perspective that you hold with doing a podcast in terms of the sponsors that you've inquired, new sponsors that you want to get in the future. Just kind of talk us through that from the very beginning when you pitched the idea of the Pit Press to a local business in Albuquerque and just kind of their response.
Yeah, so I think it all starts with building a foundation and building this platform that draws viewership, that draws listenership. And now that we established that, like I said, each episode probably generates 250, maybe even 300 impressions, depending on what content we're featuring, what guests we have coming on. And so once we established that, we started reaching out to local businesses. I wanted to keep it local because I'm a local guy. I want to promote local businesses. So we approached a few local realtors, few restaurants, and forgive me, I'm spacing some of the sponsors that we have on our podcast now. Davis Healthcare Navigation, Stacy Davis, Abrazo Homes, who you guys might be familiar with. They're a pretty predominant, I wouldn't say they're real estate, but they build custom homes in New Mexico. They are now a sponsor. So we wanted to bring these sponsors in. My pitch to them was, hey, we're generating this many views, this many listens for our podcast. This is more so what we're covering. We're not necessarily associated to the program, but a lot of 100% of our content is driven around UNM Athletics. Do you want to be a part of something like this? And so some of the newer sponsors, I was kind of lenient on pricing, just kind of breaking them into the market. And so we can have their logo distributed on our YouTube channel. We're retweeting, resharing a lot of their Instagram or social posts, and really just giving them more exposure. And it was kind of like a package deal where we have all these platforms on social media, YouTube. We have all these different ways to provide more exposure for our brands, our sponsors. Outside of just logo distribution, if they wanted a 30-second voiceover reel before every episode on our Spotify podcast, we can kind of present that. If they wanted like a 20, 25, 30-second commercial displayed either before or in between our YouTube podcast, we could do that too. So we wanted to create different streams of revenue, but we also wanted to create value for our sponsors by offering them all these different options. You sponsor us, you get all these different routes. You have social media, you have YouTube, you have these voiceover on all these podcasts. And more so, we tracked all the statistics how many downloads we had for that episode. And we're kind of providing that information in like a report, just so they know that their sponsorship is not going wasted. Like this is actually what it's generating. So I think that's what the sponsors really care about, is how many people are watching, how many people are listening. And that's kind of the platform we established. And that's what we're pushing for.
Nice. Janelle, do you have any questions for our guest?
I do. How many episodes have you done?
We just surpassed 50. So I think we're on number 53 or 54. And now that we're kind of in the academic calendar with UNM, I think we're going to float around maybe 2, possibly 3 episodes per week. So that's another feature there too, that we can pitch to our sponsors. It's, hey, like we're averaging 300 impressions on each episode, but we're doing that 3 times a week. So each week your brand or your advertisement is reaching 900 people. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we want to sit as time and family allows. But yeah.
Right. Well, it seems to have grown pretty quickly, and I think it's an amazing platform to work off of. So thank you for introducing it to us.
Thank you. I think it grew a lot faster than we anticipated, right? It started as a pipe dream, and now here we are.
Do you envision yourself going full-time into podcast and marketing for Pit Press?
I don't think my current boss would like that. I think Ryan and Ed probably would appreciate something like that. I think that's where they want to be, and I would like to be a third member to that. I think they're doing a lot of the interviews during the day because that's when the athletes can do it. I kind of like being a little removed from it at times, just kind of running it on the business side and kind of like a small side hustle. But I think if we can get to that point of it's a full-time, it's supporting Ryan, it's supporting Ed, and we're making a little extra money and we're pushing content all the time. I think that's definitely where we want to be, right? We don't want to cap ourselves. We've kind of followed the footsteps of some other networks that we've kind of built relationships with over this journey. Bronco Nation News, which is the Boise State network, they're huge. Like they travel with the teams on the road for football and basketball. They got involved in the NIL space, so that they're actually paying athletes to have their own shows on their podcast network. They have sponsors for days, like you name. Boise also has a lot more money than this market does, so it's more doable there. But they have such a wide span. I think they have maybe 15 full-time employees. I think that's where we want to get. But for now, I mean, we're 8 months into this, so that's kind of the trajectory we're going on.
Awesome.
And Erik, you plan to cover all the athletics at UNM, or do you specialize in just particular sports?
No, it's all athletics. I'm like my background, my roots. I have 2 nieces that are growing up in Santa Fe. We want to cover women's basketball. We want to cover the women's soccer team. We had a few baseball guests on at the end of last year. We want to cover all the programs. I think all the programs and athletes deserve some type of exposure more than the athletic department can cover. I think, but now predominantly basketball and football is what is generating the most buzz, and that's kind of what our sweet spot is. But yeah, I think we want to hit on all sports.
And Erik, what's the upcoming season looking like for our basketball team, our baseball teams, and our football teams?
Basketball is looking real good. Well, let me take a step back. Let's talk football since we're in the midst of football season. Football season's looking to rebound off a few bad years. They finished 2-10 last season. This is Danny Gonzalez's 4th year. They have 41 new players on this year's roster that they didn't have last year, and that's a combination of transfers and for incoming freshmen. And I think they're just kind of rebuilding the culture. And from what we're seeing and hearing in practice, they just played this weekend. Didn't fare so well, but they were also facing a powerhouse Texas A&M. But I think it's looking up. They have a ton more talent, at the skill set positions this year. They brought in a new quarterback transfer from UAB who has been pretty successful in his college career. So they have the pieces in place. Their running back room is extremely deep. They have more big guys up front, kind of on the defensive and offensive side. Their home opener is this coming Saturday, so I hope people can get out and start showing them some support. They want to sell it out. I don't know if they'll get to that point, but that stadium holds 40,000, and at one point this program was kind of on that front. They were selling out the stadium, right? And then the following week after that, or 2 weeks after, they'll host New Mexico State. So we got to beat State, and I mean, by the time they finish up that week, there's a good chance that they could be 3-1, which would kind of start the conversation of them being bowl eligible again. So I think they've kind of turned a corner. They just got to start building some momentum and start rattling off some wins. On On the basketball side of things, they look to be really good. They had a bounce back season last year. They were 14-0 at one point before they had their first loss. They bring back pretty much all their stud guys minus Morris Udeze, who graduated. But Mashburn and House are back. Dent is back. And they got a few additions through the transfer portal. Like I had mentioned, we broke the news about Nelly Jr. Joseph. He's a transfer from Iona. He actually played against the Lobos in the pit last year and finished with like 23 points, 18 rebounds or something ridiculous. He's now a Lobo. He played for Coach Pitino's father, Rich Pitino, at Iona. So he transferred to UNM. Mustafa Amzil, who transferred in from Dayton, who's kind of another winner, right? So they're adding these guys to an already stacked team, adding some size, adding some athleticism. A lot of the major national outlets, Bleacher Report, Busting Brackets, stuff that we follow on the day-to-day, they're predicting the Lobos to be one of those dark horse teams to make a run, not only make the tournament, but to make a run either to the Sweet 16 and Elite 8. And could you imagine New Mexico making it to the Elite 8 or even just making it to the Sweet 16? This place would go bonkers. So I think
that'd be incredible.
Yeah, and on paper, I think this is probably one of the best Lobo rosters. Might be ever. Richard Pitino did make a comment about that. So those are not my words. Those are his. I just so happen to believe it. So the buzz and the hype are real. And you know how you've gone to some pit games, 15,000 deep, going absolutely insane. Like those are some fun times. And I think that's what they want to bring back after a few bad years.
Man, I tell you, Lobo basketball, Lobo sports history, we've had our ups and downs. So it's really promising to hear that on paper, this team stands to be one of the nationally ranked teams and one of our best teams that we've ever had. Is there a particular moment in Lobo sports history, regardless of the sport, that you look back really just fondly, just one of your favorite moments? And then on the flip side, is there any of those just gut-wrenching stomach punch moments of being a Lobo fan?
Oh, yeah. So probably the biggest was back in the 2009, 10, 11, 12 years. They had Kendall Williams, Hugh Greenwood, Alex Kerr, Cam Bairstow. Like that's when they were really good. I think at one point during when they did make the tournament, Charles Barkley and Barack Obama had the Lobos in their Final Four picks.
Wow.
And that's when the program was kind of on the top, right? And they were getting some of that national exposure, which kind of also leads me into one of the downfalls of the gut-wrenching punches when Steve Alford decided to leave, like following that season that they lost to Harvard.
Yep.
So, I mean, yeah, so one of my favorite times and then one of my worst times all bunched in within like a couple months of each other. So I'm one of those guys that's like half glass full with the whole Steve Alford leaving. And like, if you think about it, like how much money he was getting from UCLA, the endorsement deal, the exposure, just the name brand of UCLA. Like, I don't think there were many schools on Alford's list that he would have left UNM to go to. It just so happened to be UCLA was one of them.
Yep.
Right. I think the other one might have been Indiana because he was an Olympic star basketball player, national champion at Indiana, playing under Bob Knight. So I don't blame him for going. It just the timing of everything was not so good. And it kind of left a bad taste in a lot of Lobo fans' mouths.
It really did. And you're right. It was an offer that he couldn't refuse. UCLA is the most storied college basketball program there is. So it was really hard to fault him on that. But I'm totally with you. There was just so much momentum for that program at that time. One thing that I just wanted to share really quickly, tell me if you remember this, my friend. You mentioned Charles Spider Smith, one of the great Lobo players in UNM's basketball program history. Do you recall when he was with the San Antonio Spurs and he went head to head with Michael Jordan. This was Jordan's time with the Wizards, but it was still Michael Jordan. And Spider Smith just shut him down. Like, he kept Jordan under 10 points. Spider scored, I think, like 25 points, like blocked Jordan a couple times, stole the ball from him. Like, that was Charles Spider Smith's finest moment. And it just happened to be head to head against one of the greatest of all time. Do you recall that game?
I don't recall that game, but I do recall Charles Spider Smith and how dominant he was. Like, he would literally take over games. I think he's one of those Lobos that now looking back on it might have been a little underappreciated.
Yep.
But he's one of the names. Like, you walk through the pit now, or you walk through where the players have their practice facility and some of their locker rooms, on just the amount of memorabilia on the walls, and you see Charles Spider Smith in his Spurs jersey kind of on the wall. They have like an NBA wall with all their recent like NBA players that had been drafted out of UNM. It's pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, we've been trying to get him on the podcast. He's not as easily reachable as we had hoped, but I mean, if we keep this thing going, then maybe we'll have him on and we'll have you join us one of those times.
Oh, that'd be an absolute honor, my friend. Thank you very much. So, I mean, this is what the Santa Fe Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is all about. It is highlighting the excellence of our entrepreneurs and business owners in our community. Erik, you are one of those shining examples, and it's just an absolute privilege and a pleasure to be able to speak with you today and to talk about just your history growing up in New Mexico and being this founder of this really just great new rising podcast, the Pit Press Podcast. Is there anything that you would like to plug?
No, I appreciate your guys' time bringing me on the show. Me and David talk pretty much either on the daily, if not every other day, just kind of bouncing ideas off each other. I do a pretty good job of keeping up with what's going on the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here to help promote you guys too. So I think that's how this works. It's a network of entrepreneurs, business owners, kind of building a network and elevating each other. I think that's the only way it works. It's that organic and natural feel with Northern New Mexicans, right? That's what you guys want to do, is support each other and building each other up. So.
Right.
Erik, thank you so much, my friend. We appreciate the time, and we hope to catch you all here very soon. We're Santa Fe Hispanic Chamber of Commerce podcast, working alongside the Pit Press podcast. This is just going to be one of many, and we just thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.